concept of Luke Cage came out of the early 1970s when there was a rise of black power and African reviewing of themselves within the population of the United States of America. With civil rights as the agenda of the African Americans, they were very vocal about themselves as well as the situation within the country. Deciding to take advantage of this, Marvel writers at the time came up with a character that would be a prime example of this, Luke Cage. Writers wanted to put this new hero against what was then considered normal. In the public eye, noble and eager for cooperation with other heroes or heroines. Cage did not want anything to do with publicity. Having grown up in the gritty Harlem of Manhattan, New York City, he had street smarts, and the streets were anything but noble and just. He himself wished for nothing more than a quiet life once he was cleared of all wrongdoings from which he was framed for. Cage, in his earliest appearances, wasn't as cool or level-headed as he is now. Although writers created the character for the blaxploitations of the time, he still had aspects of stereotypical black behavior, such as not necessarily being intelligent as other heroes and using violence rather than wit or intelligence to solve disputes. His premiere issue, Luke Cage, Hero for Hire, June of 1972, took full advantage of the black hype and was later retitled Luke Cage, Power Man, with issue 17. However, as the years passed, interest in black heroes and heroines in a commanding role quickly disappeared from mainstream American comics, and editorial leadership decided to save the character by putting Luke into a comic with another hero, Danny Rand, also known as the Iron Fist, who was a creation of the Kung Fu craze that appeared and disappeared at the same time of the blaxploitation in America. Hence the title was called Luke Cage and Iron Fist, with issue 50 in September of 1978, and finally being cancelled in 1986, with its final issue of 125. Though Luke Cage was a long-running African-American themed comic for over 10 years, after the cancellation of the comic, the character made few appearances from then on. In 1992, the first real revival of Luke Cage in decades was when the character appeared in the comic, simply titled Cage, where he destroys his iconic 1970s outfit due to Cage being seriously outdated and needing a modern interpretation. In 1996, after the X-Men Onslaught event and Heroes Reborn, Luke Cage and a few other characters were brought back for the Heroes for Hire series, which lasted 19 issues, then was cancelled, and again the character was disused. In 2001, Cage was then brought back for the comic Alias with the new character Jessica Jones. Being in Marvel Comics in some form or another as part of Marvel's diversification, including characters of color, religion, or affiliation, Cage regularly appears in comics today. With the backstory of Luke Cage now known, let the discussion now come to his origin and story. Much like in the series, Luke Cage's real name is Carl Lucas and grew up within the Harlem district of Manhattan. However, in the comics, to try and survive in Harlem, he joined a gang called the Rivals, consisting of himself, Willis Stryker, Shades, and Comanche. Unlike the series, in the comics, Luke doesn't have the poetic outlook of life and isn't as intelligent as in the series. Luke originally did well in the gang and had dreams of being a huge player in the Harlem gang scene. Only after major faults does Carl finally see that his actions is hurting the family and people around him. Not wanting to do anything with the Rivals anymore, he then decides to find legitimate employment and a crimeless life. He still keeps in touch with Stryker as the both of them were very close friends. While Carl is getting his life back in order, Stryker goes further into the crime scene, seeking to make a name for himself even more. Stryker attacks the Maggia crime family, the Italian mob within the Marvel Universe. However, the stunt goes badly and Stryker is badly beaten by mafiosos, and Carl narrowly saves Stryker's life. Stryker's girlfriend, Reva Connors, breaks up with him as a result of this, and out of fear because of the gang life that Stryker is in, and seeks comfort with Carl. Convinced that Carl is the cause of the breakup, Stryker plants heroin at his apartment and tips off the police. Framed by Stryker, Carl is astonished with the betrayal at the hands of his childhood best friend. While arrested, Lucas hears about the apparent death of his father, becomes enraged at him not being there for his father's last days. repeatedly breaking out of prison and being recaptured, Carl becomes violent and a danger to any officer in any prison. Eventually transferred to a maximum security prison within the state of Georgia, Seagate, Carl becomes the sadistic pawn of a racist prison guard, Albert Billy Bob Rackham. Due to other inmates' complaints and his reckless style of prison control, he is demoted in rank and blames Carl for this. With Carl's situation at Seagate not faring any better, scientist Noah Bernstein has Carl volunteer for an experiment at cellular regeneration. The process is similar to the super soldier serum that gave Captain America his powers decades before. With the process started, Bernstein leaves the experiment for a few moments, in which Rackham sneaks in to alter the process in hopes of hurting or killing Carl. The treatment pushes Carl past his limits and as a side effect gives him super strength and durability. Although in the comics it's nowhere near the level as Captain America and can be argued that it's less in terms of strength. As a result of Rackham's interference with the experiment, an explosion occurs that kills Rackham himself, and Carl escapes Seagate. Eventually making his way back to New York, Carl Lucas has a chance encounter with criminals and discovers the powers he got as a result of the experiment at Seagate. Deciding to use his new powers for profit, he adopts the new name of Luke Cage, as well as the alter ego of Power Man. Setting up base in New York, Luke makes new friends as well as Dr. Noah Bernstein, who tracks him down and sets up a medical clinic with his assistant Claire Temple, which Luke soon begins to form a relationship with. Stryker himself later becomes a member of the Maggia under the codename of Diamondback and dies fighting Luke Cage. Reva is also killed by the Maggia for her connections to Willis and Carl. The character of Luke Cage does not have much more of an origin besides this. The character has had more exposure in recent decades, which might add to his character history and development. Luke himself in the comics is aware of the plight that African Americans face on a daily basis, and has experienced first-hand racism in New York as a black hero, and police brutality at the hands of Rackham, even gang violence with the Rivals and Diamondback. Even the superhero title of Power Man has not been exclusive to Cage. He has had to fight Eric Justin, also known as Atlas, for the right to use that title. Through recons, Luke Cage has also been involved with Jessica Jones, even getting married and having a daughter, Danielle, named in honor of Danny Rand, the Iron Fist and one of Luke Cage's most trusted friends. Luke also has a near indestructible jacket, much like his own body, which was treated with the same serum that was given to him when he obtained his own powers, but he seldom wears it. Cottonmouth, also known as Cornell Stokes, was a minor character that helped to build the backstory of Luke Cage, being one of the factors that led Luke to being transported to Seagate and receiving his powers. Cottonmouth had powers similar to Luke and had sharp teeth which were capable of piercing Luke Cage's indestructible skin. Having died in battle, he has since been revived. Mariah Dillard, also known as Black Mariah, was not related to Cottonmouth in any way in the comics. Functioning as a supervillain in her own right, she had no actual powers. Although her weight was in excess of 400 pounds, she often threw herself around and used her body mass as a weapon. The superhero team, Heroes for Hire, was first created with Luke Cage and Iron Fist. The idea was that it combined the normal aspects of superheroes with private investigations, sort of like a mercenary team. They would be hired for various jobs. Luke Cage and Iron Fist were the main focus, but Misty Knight and Colleen Wing were frequently appearing characters, although either of them never officially became part of the Heroes for Hire. Later on, other factions would take the mantle of Heroes for Hire. The concept of adapting the Luke Cage comics to television or film was actually debated by Marvel for years, before Netflix finally decided to make a show based on the characters. Writers for the episodes, as well as the actors and actresses within the show, were mostly African, which was a first for Marvel and American television in general. The idea about a Luke Cage movie goes all the way back to 2003, but nothing came out of the discussions and speculation. Eventually, it was decided to put Luke Cage into a television show, more than a movie. The argument was that most Americans wouldn't show interest in a black superhero or African American issues, like racism, stereotypes, or bias towards them. But this show proved to be watched and enjoyed by peoples of all colors and nationalities. Compared to other comic book narratives, this one is rather small and vague, not exactly on purpose. Luke Cage did not have much character use, character development, or character interaction with other superheroes in the Marvel Universe for most of his history. In modern times, with more diversity within the Marvel comics, this will definitely change. This narration might be updated if the demand is high enough to hear more about Luke Cage, or the people in his life, or the situation he finds himself in. Leave a comment with your thoughts.